Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and as you saw from our introduction, for the next hour we will be learning a lot more about multiple sclerosis, including, maybe I might be able to say it by the end of the night. We are not live this evening, so unfortunately you cannot call. However, you are more than welcome to email me at talk@bcattv.org if you have a question for our wonderful guest, whom you will meet momentarily, or if you have a suggestion for a future topic or an idea for a guest, just send me a note. I would love to hear from you. I would also like to thank the crew for this evening. Chris Flaherty is one of the staff members here, and he's making sure that all of us volunteers behave ourselves and make sure everything goes off without a hitch. So thank you, Chris. We also have Evan McNamee, Evan Peckham, and Noah Donahue, who are part of the Video Voyager program and have volunteered to give up their Wednesday evening, or in this case, not Wednesday evening, to come and help us out at BCAT. So thank you, Noah, Evan, and Evan. And last but definitely not least, as always, I'd like to thank my husband Paul for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Even though one kid is here, you're still home with the other, so I really appreciate that. So thank you. Now, all housekeepings aside, I would like to introduce you to my wonderful guest, Amanda Samuels.
Hello.
And you are an advocate for multiple sclerosis.
I am.
And I can't wait to hear about all the advances in the disease and how people impacted by this aren't really impacted. Well, let's just go on. So before we get into the subject, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you grew up, how you came to the Burlington area, and what really made you get involved in the upcoming walk that we will be talking about shortly.
Absolutely. So I am a Burlington local. I was born and raised. My parents still live in Burlington. I am right outside Burlington and Woburn. But I grew up, actually went to Francis Wyman for the first year it opened.
Go Falcons!
Yep. And am now a teacher at Francis Wyman. I teach general music for all the kids at Francis Wyman. So I've been here forever, minus a few years away for college. I left and came back.
Well, I'm glad that you came back.
I am too. It's a great place to live.
So, how did you become aware of the Multiple Sclerosis Society?
So my first introduction to multiple sclerosis in a whole was actually in college. One of my friends got diagnosed around 19, which is pretty young actually to be diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So it wasn't something we had dealt with before. And the two of us were in marching band at the collegiate level together. And we were also in a band fraternity, a service fraternity.
Oh, cool.
It was great. And at the same time, one of my favorite music professors started having struggles, and we didn't know why. And she came to us and she said, well, this is happening because I have multiple sclerosis. So with her in mind and with my friend Jess in mind, my local, the fraternity, our service fraternity, started actually hosting the MS walks on my campus.
Cool.
And so that was my first introduction.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to UConn.
Oh, okay.
So that was like my first introduction, however so many years ago. And as life does, I got older, I had my son, and hadn't really been involved with the MS Society in a while. I myself was then diagnosed with MS in 2019.
Okay.
And that is where I started to learn more about MS. I was asked to speak at one of the MS walks a few years back, and that has just kind of been my journey. More than anything, I just like MS can often be an invisible disability.
Okay.
And if I can talk to anyone, whether it be friend or a friend of a friend, and explain a little bit what we go through so we have some more understanding, I am more than welcome to do that because it is an interesting disease.
Right. Well, like you said, it's like one of those invisible diseases.
Yes.
So what exactly is MS?
So multiple sclerosis is the actual literal meaning is multiple sclerosis, or meaning multiple scars. So
okay.
it's when it's an autoimmune disease that affects the central nervous system.
Okay.
So basically, my immune system attacks, it could be my brain, it can be my brainstem, anything
nerves.
in that area.
Oh, so like, the central, like the spine and
All
the
of that. And that's
central
why
nervous system. Oh,
there
okay.
it's such a, people often call it the snowflake disease, because every single person who has MS is going to be affected differently. Because your brain is such an important organ. One area getting hit could be completely different than the other, and it is so different to every single person.
And we have like a bazillion nerves anyway.
Correct.
So.
Well, and it's what happens. It's called a demyelinating event. Everyone throughout your body, you have nerves.
Okay.
And your nerve has a protective coating called myelin. And your immune system, instead of attacking the bad germs that come into your body, it will actually attack the myelin, the casing, meaning
weird.
that your nerves are more unprotected.
Okay.
The best way I had it explained to me was to think of a house. Think of the electrical system that goes through the house, and all of the wires that go in your house have that like black coating on it.
Plastic sheath.
If you rub that black coating off,
Yeah.
and they're exposed to water, heat, anything like that, they're going to spark.
And you can set your house on fire.
Correct. And that basically is what happens to people with MS.
Well, hopefully you won't spontaneously combust.
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, because I kind of mentioned to you before the show, when I was growing up, a friend of mine, her dad was diagnosed with MS probably when he was about what your age is now. And he wasn't able to walk. When I first met her in 4th grade, he was using a walker, and then I think by 6th grade he was wheelchair bound and couldn't walk, needed help eating, couldn't tie his shoes, all that kind of stuff. So, comparing that experience with my very limited exposure to you, it's a world of difference.
So the first thing that a lot of people don't notice nowadays is that most people have multiple people in their lives who have multiple sclerosis, and they just don't know.
Okay.
The multiple sclerosis that we saw 10, 20 years ago is completely different. We are so lucky that through things like the MS Society, we have research, and they're coming up with new medications and treatments and things they didn't know, and it is changing lives. It really does. So there are plenty of people, and there are different types of MS. There are different severities within the different types. I am very lucky that I'm still, I have a great medication. I am still relatively new in my diagnosis. And because I was also caught early in my diagnosis, I didn't have that many flares. Medication has kept me from currently having too many permanent disabilities. I do have my struggles. But it's a case by case, and it's different by people. There's different per person. Recently, Selma Blair has been in the news a lot. She was recently diagnosed with MS, and she immediately had a cane and a walker she needed to use, and had actually issues with her voice, where she was having even trouble speaking in general. So it really is very much a person to person.
Like the whole snowflake
Yes,
comparison.
you don't know which person you're going to be, and it depends on what medication you get, your lifestyle, and all of those things play in how bad your disability may be.
Okay. 2 questions. I do want to find out more about, different medications and how they impact you. But also, you mentioned different types. Are they like, not to compare it to like cancers, but, cancer, there's lung cancer and heart cancer, is it like that, or is it just where it affects your brain?
It's more severity.
How is it different?
It's more severity.
So
basically, there are 4 main types. The first type is called CIS, or clinically isolated syndrome, and that is basically anyone who has a demyelinating event. It happens once. It might not ever happen again. And so it's technically a form of MS, but it's CIS, it's most likely you will never have it happen again. A lot of people who have clinically isolated syndromes don't take medications. They might treat the initial flare, but they won't continue treatment because the chance of it happening again is very slim.
How do you know if you're one of those cases? Do you just wait to see if something happens again?
Yes, that's what happened to me. So I was initially diagnosed with clinically isolated syndrome,
Okay.
and then that my diagnosis progressed to MS. But
Okay.
some people it never does. The next kind of, I guess, step up from clinically isolated syndrome is RRMS, which is relapse and remittance. And basically, that is the idea of you have flares when your disability and your symptoms are at their highest.
Okay.
And then you go back to
Like a remission.
a remission.
Okay.
So it again depends on the person. It depends on how old you are. It depends on a lot of things. Some people can completely heal from a flare. Some people might heal 75%, and each time they have a flare, their disability
So
gets
it's
a little
gradual.
harder.
Okay.
It completely depends on the person. It completely depends on what medication they're on. And just how their body reacts. The older you get, the harder it is to bounce back from a flare.
Okay.
But also, the older you are, the less likely you are to have as many flares.
Oh, okay.
So it's just one of those things that, again, it completely depends on the person and the situation.
It's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most people are diagnosed.
Not that you'd want a medical condition where you're gambling, but
But of them, honestly, most people, when you're diagnosed, you are diagnosed with RRMS. And of the MSs, the relapse and remittent is the better
okay.
to have. You don't want it to have it at all, but it's one of the better ones. After RRMS is secondary, and there's a certain, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but there's a certain percentage of people who start as RRMS and move into secondary.
Okay.
And basically that means you're still relapsing and remitting, but you're not healing as much. And
Okay.
your disability overall, in general, there is a gradual increase to your symptoms and your disability.
Would it be like a increase in frequency or increase in
Depends
how
on
it-
the person,
Of
how
course.
it affects you. It could be frequency. It could be, because even with RRMS, there are some people who have 3 flares a year. There are some people who have 1 flare a year. I personally have been very lucky that I've had about 1 flare every 3 to 4 years.
Knock on wood.
So it
Okay.
again is completely dependent on the person, the medication, the situation, even where you live can affect it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, it's completely different. Then the last one is primary progressive. That one is the much harder MS to have, and that's probably what your friend's father had. That has it's just a steady increase in symptoms and disability, and it is not, I think it's about between 10 to 15% of people with MS are diagnosed with primary progressive, and it is just a steady increase in disability and symptoms.
Again, we're going back 40 years, so, all bets are off, but no, I get that it affects each individual differently, but is there a way to know if you are susceptible? Is it a genetic thing, like if you have family history? Is it, socioeconomic? Is it, ethnic or race related, or?
It all depends.
Of course it does.
That's the story of MS. One of the things that they kind of have a correlation.
Okay.
People who live closer to the equator tend to not get MS as frequently. They believe that has to do with vitamin D levels. All people who have MS have very low vitamin D levels. So in my situation, I make sure my son gets plenty of vitamin D. There have
Darn, you'll just have to move to the beach.
Yeah, yep, darn. But there is also like a level of, there is, again, correlation. There are sometimes families who can tend to get it, but there's also a correlation more between autoimmune diseases in general. So like my sister has celiac disease, which is autoimmune. And the fact that she has celiac and I have multiple sclerosis kind of makes sense in a little way.
Okay.
So like there are psoriasis, things like that are all autoimmune diseases. So it's not necessarily if I have MS, any child I have might have MS. It's more that it's an autoimmune disease, and it could be something similar to that. The other thing that they're just doing a lot of research on, and is tip of the iceberg that they have started to research is actually the Epstein-Barr virus, which
What's that?
that's the virus that causes mononucleosis.
Oh, okay.
And they believe that there is a connection between having gotten mono
Okay.
and then later in life getting MS. Now,
Really?
with that being said, that does not mean if you had mono, you are going to have
I'm like,
MS.
doesn't like everybody.
Most people in their life, like
Yeah.
not most, a lot of people.
A lot of people.
But no one who didn't have MS didn't. If you didn't have
If you currently, or if you're
had
diagnosed,
MS, you definitely had mono
Okay.
at some point.
right? So it's
And so that's
not
one
a
of,
mutual thing,
Yes.
but okay.
So it's one of the it's that and that research is brand new within
Just-
the past year that they have just really actually said yes, there is a connection. We don't know exactly everything, but there is a
But
connection.
let's continue down this path and see
Yeah.
what else we can figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Now, speaking of testing, with current research, are there attempts at seeing if you are more likely to get it based on a certain genome or DNA, or
So
does that make any
yes,
sense?
so yeah,
Okay.
yes, it makes sense. Not
I know
to
that wasn't
my-
on my
yeah.
question. I'm sorry.
No, not to my knowledge. I don't know a lot. The hardest
Okay.
part about MS is diagnosis because it is such a, again, snowflake disease. I keep saying
Right.
the same thing. It is such an unusual disease.
But
per
it's a great
person.
analogy.
It is, and that's its nickname. Because it's so different, it's hard to actually say this is why this happens.
Okay.
And so when you actually go about getting diagnosed, I kind of remember logic puzzles I used to do in middle school where you have to have, there are A, B, C, D, E, and F. You don't need to have all of them, but you at least need to have 3. And it could be any of those 3, but
Okay.
you at least need to have 3 of those to get your MS diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
So the first step is actually doing a blood test to show that it's not anything else that they can test for your blood.
Okay.
And so that knocks out, and that's one reason they can say you have it. After that, they will normally do a MRI, and I have yearly MRIs. It is just part of having an
Okay.
MS.
MRI is like the brain scan?
Yep, it's a
Okay.
scan of your brain, and it's actually because it can affect your spinal cord.
Okay.
It's a scan of your spinal cord to your brain.
Oh, okay.
And so that will be part of your diagnosis. The hard part with the MRIs is lesions. As you get older, you naturally get lesions. And they wouldn't be the same as an MS lesion, but if
Okay.
you're having your first MS flare, you wouldn't have as
There
many
wouldn't be that.
as multiple
Right,
scleroses
okay.
as there would be on someone. But as we all generally age, there are migraines. Things like that can cause tiny little
okay.
blips, I guess,
Okay.
on the MRI. So again, that's if you are someone who all of a sudden comes in and they see these lesions on the MRI,
Okay.
they can't exactly say this wasn't from a car accident you had 4 years ago if you
Okay.
haven't had an MRI in the past.
Right. There's no
And nothing to
basis of
compare it.
comparison.
Yeah.
Okay.
After that,
Baseline. That's what I was thinking.
baseline,
Of.
yes.
Okay.
After that, there is also a lumbar puncture where they will take spinal
That does
fluid.
not sound pleasant.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Anything with puncture in it just.
It's
Okay.
It's kind of think of if anyone has ever gone through an epidural.
Okay.
It's a little bit more painful than that.
Okay.
And
So they take spinal
they
fluid
take
out
spinal
of.
fluid and they
Okay.
test it. And there are a type of banding that they can find in it. And again, if you have the bands, it doesn't mean you have to
It's
have
not
MS.
an automatic diagnosis, but it's.
If you don't have the bands, you can't have MS.
Got it.
So it's
But is the bands one of the?
it's one of the things that
6
if you
or
have that
okay.
among other things, you can
Okay.
potentially have MS. And then the last thing is the demyelinating events. So in a lot of cases, it's having happened twice. So the fact that I was first diagnosed with CIS, clinically isolated
Okay.
syndrome, by the time I had it my second time, that
Okay.
was part of the process of how they diagnose MS.
Okay. Now, if it is the CIS,
Mm-hmm.
how do they know it's MS and not just some other random thing that your body's doing?
Between the MRI and like the kind of
Okay, so it
beginning
still has to be,
processes-
you can
so-
still get the 3 of the 6.
So with my CIS diagnosis, I had the bands in my spinal fluid.
Okay.
I had the
Lesion?
sclerosis, the lesions on my
Okay.
MRI, and I had a demyelinating event. I, at the time, got double vision, and I couldn't
okay.
see, and then I had some balance and cognitive issues.
Okay.
And so that was my 3, but I didn't have it happen twice. So they said, you could get MS. We'll keep a track of you and we'll see how it goes.
Come back in 6 months, or come back in a year.
And so basically for 5 years, I went back for 6 months and they said, you're clear. And I was told I didn't have MS. And then I had my second event and that's when I was diagnosed. So it takes a time. It's not a immediate diagnosis for very many people.
Okay. I don't think this is on here, but I'm just like sucked into your story.
Absolutely.
When you did, just if someone were to be diagnosed, is there like a support system or a support network or something? Because that's got to come as a shock.
Yes. So the MS Society is phenomenal. They
Okay.
offer a whole bunch of support groups. I had the best one for me, I found, was a working professional women's group.
Okay.
There are different support groups kind of depending on your level of disability, I should say.
Okay.
I had gone to one when I was first diagnosed that a lot of people had a lot more severe disability than I had.
Okay.
That wasn't the right place for me at the time.
Yeah, that would be kind of scary.
It was scary for me to go there, and I didn't know that, and I learned the hard way.
Okay.
But I ended up finding a group of wonderful women who are all around my same age, and therefore we all kind of have had the same medical path where we've had similar medications, we had similar doctors, and so we just kind of were able to commiserate and deal with our path, and also when newbies come in, be like, look, it's not that bad, we can do it, you can too.
Yeah, don't go to them.
Yeah,
don't go to that.
we
other
got
group.
it. So there's that. Finding a good doctor is really important. I had to fight to get my doctor because I was at first told to see just a neurologist.
Okay.
And especially
just a neurologist. Oh
which
my
it
gosh.
sounds crazy, but my doctor is actually an MS neurologist. His specialty,
okay.
He works in the MS center in Boston, so that when I get help, I go directly and I see everyone I see has experience and only works with people with multiple sclerosis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it is
I didn't think you could get more specialized than a neurologist.
You can, and it's so important too, because the research, especially in something like MS, the research changes daily, and you want to have the person on your side who can see that there's a new research
Keep up with the
opportunity
pace,
and say, hey, we're switching you to this med right now because it's going to change your life.
Okay. Cool. Well, speaking of medication, you said MS itself is not a one-size-fits-all. I can only imagine that the medications aren't one-size-fits-all. How does your doctor go about figuring out, or how do you go about figuring out which is the right medication for you? I mean, do you try one and then, oh, this is giving me funky side effects, let's try something else, or?
So there are, yes, there's tiers of medication and there are different types of medication. So part of it is what your comfort level is. There are self-injectables.
Okay.
There
so if you're afraid of needles, that's probably not a good option.
Right. There are daily pills and there are infusions. Each one, this is a serious disease. Each one holds serious side effects. Depending on your personal medical history, one might not work for you just because that side effect might affect if you have someone with heart condition. There is one pill that can give you heart issues. You're not going to go do that one.
Let's not try that one.
It all depends. There is also, I'll be honest, insurance is an issue. Some of these medications are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if your insurance isn't willing to cover that, you can get trapped. Now, there are a lot of programs that help pay, and again, MS Society helps with a lot of that, so that there is a fight that you have to go through in order to get the life-changing medication.
But you have enough other,
and
mental
that's another
energy
thing.
being.
but we're lucky that places like the MS Society actually will have advocates who can help you fight that. And my doctor is my biggest advocate. So I'm personally on infusions. I started on one and it didn't quite work for me. And my risk for a very specific side effect was growing. And so there's something called the JCV, which is a type of virus that 90% of the population has. Most of it comes off as a common cold. If you're on this very specific drug, it can cause permanent brain damage.
That wouldn't be good.
No, and so they test you regularly for it, and as your levels raise, they say, okay, now we take you off that medication and we put you on another one. So I started on one. I was moved to another. The medication I'm on now is Ocrevus. It's an infusion. I love it.
Now, what is an infusion?
An infusion is an IV. So I go to the one I was
different from an injection.
An injection is most of them are, think of an EpiPen. It
so
looks like an EpiPen.
Goes in your muscle.
Yeah, and usually it's in the stomach, and they would inject it into themselves. An infusion is I go to an infusion center, a nurse hooks me up to an IV bag, and I'm there for 6 hours.
Oh, lovely.
And I joke it's mommy vacation.
How frequently do you have to do this?
For the specific drug I'm on, I go every 6 months.
Okay, I was thinking it was like a weekly thing.
No, I go every 6 months. When I was on before, I would go once a month. And even that can be, it depends on your lifestyle. For me, the fact that I don't have to remember to take a pill daily, that I don't have to inject myself, which for me, I don't think I could do. And the fact that I can just go every 6 months and I'm okay.
And at this appointment, they schedule you 6 months out, so you don't really have to think about it.
Yep, and they do all my blood draws at the same time, so we are constantly getting feedback on how my medication is doing and what levels I need, and it's like a constant process.
Now, do you have to go to downtown Boston, or does like Leahy have a branch, or?
So it depends on who your doctor is. There is an infusion center, I believe, at Leahy. My personal doctor is through Beth Israel. So in the past, when I first started, I did have to go into Boston, but there's also an infusion center in Beth Israel in Lexington. So that's where I go, which is very convenient for me.
That is convenient.
So,
although once every 6 months having to go to downtown Boston isn't,
not the end
a
of the
deal
world.
breaker. So.
Yeah. So you make it work.
I'm just kind of looking through this. How does, like, I know you said you have relatively mild symptoms. How does this impact your daily life? Do you find yourself redoing your routine like on a regular basis, or only when there are flare-ups, or how does this impact
so for me, I've been very lucky that my flares happen 2 to 3 years, and I have some form of triggering event. Having my son and stopping breastfeeding was one of my triggering events. That hormone fluctuation made me go into flare. And most recently, I got COVID, and I was very, very, very ill from COVID, and that put me into flare. The hope is that the medication prevents flare. For me in my daily life and how it affects me, when I am in flare, I wouldn't call it is severe disability when I am in flare. My symptoms, again, which could be different from anyone else's, for every single flare I've had, it's always affected my vision. So I can't, I get extreme double vision.
Probably shouldn't be driving.
Yeah, can't drive, can't read, can't watch TV, get extreme. My brain tries to accommodate for the fact that my eyes don't track together and fix it, which means my brain's working too hard, which means I get incredibly horrible migraines. And so that's just my eyes. On top of that, I will get some cognitive issues. Word retrieval becomes really difficult. And you also have migraines, so inability to concentrate. To even
migraines are just themselves are a beast.
Yes, and so it really becomes cognitively debilitating. You can't function. Add that to fatigue. And this was the first time, this flare I recently had this past winter was the first time I actually had mobility issues. It had never affected my walking before. but I was struggling. I was tripping. I was falling.
Well, you can't see, so.
You can't see, but it also affects, even
Oh.
when I could see,
Okay.
it affects feeling numbness,
Oh,
tingling.
okay.
My entire left side went numb, and you can't concentrate. So if you're trying to do too many things, you fall. So when I am in flare, it is severe disability for me.
Okay.
There is treatment, steroids, that can get you out, but again, all medications have their own side effects, so those negatively affect you as well.
Now, did you experience this while having COVID, or was it like when
I
you
was
kind
still-
of recovering from COVID and then just going down a different path of torture?
That is an interesting question because we don't know. Because long haul COVID symptoms and MS symptoms
Okay.
are actually kind of similar. So was I having
okay.
long haul COVID or was I having an MS flare at that moment?
Oh,
I don't know. All I
okay.
know is a month after I had COVID, I was struggling and they did an MRI and I had new lesions.
Oh, okay.
So
And of course, COVID is kind of a new thing that we don't really.
they are still doing research on. They don't know. They don't know a lot about long haul COVID.
Okay.
So which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Okay.
I do confidently feel like if I didn't have COVID, I would not have had a flare. I was in very good health. I was doing very well. I've been taking my medication. So,
But COVID is like a rite of passage right now.
Yes.
Where.
well,
you
and
know,
that's why we are, by the nature of the beast, we are the immunocompromised. We are some of the people that, with all of this COVID things happening, that we are the people that needed to be a little more and continue to need to be a little more protected, because we don't know what it will do to us. It's crazy.
Wow.
But back to your question, in my day to day, if I am not in flare, it does take me about 2 years to fully come back from a flare.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a slow process, and it's funny because it's all of a sudden one day, oh, I enjoy reading again. It's just something.
And of course, I send you, 3 pages of questions, and
you get through. You push through. You figure out other ways to do it. You go slowly.
I didn't put it in 6-point font,
Yeah,
so
you were fabulous. There is also an issue of the fact that, like I said the analogy earlier of being the house with the wiring. Temperature, weather affects people with MS.
Okay.
If I overheat, even though I might not be in flare, I have weak spots in my brain. And if my brain gets too hot, if I have a fever, anything like that, my MS symptoms, my vision will start to go. I'll start to trip more.
Now, would that be considered a flare-up, or is that just
how life is?
Oh, okay.
And so I have to be conscious that if I go to the beach, I'm in the water 97% of the time, because if I step out and I'm in direct sunlight for too long, I'm going to have issues.
those little spray fans?
Yes. I have cooling towels. When I mow my lawn, I actually wear an ice pack vest.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
it keeps me cool enough that I can mow my lawn and it's not an issue. So it's little things like that of planning
Okay.
to make sure that I can do what I want to do. Fatigue is also a huge issue with most people who have MS. And so it's the idea of if I get a little too hot or if I push myself a little too far, it's different than an average person just getting tired. It's harder for me to bounce back.
Okay.
I like to say it's like stealing from Peter to pay Paul. In my situation,
Okay.
I can do 95% of things. I'm going to pay for it later. And so I have to make conscious decisions. If I'm going to take my son to an amusement park and we're going to be outside in 95-degree heat for a day, it's going to take me, I'm going to be not the happiest person. It's going to be harder for me in general to be there. But it's also going to take me 3 days to recover from that.
Okay.
So it is.
Is it worth 3 days of misery to make your kid happy?
Yeah, and you have to balance that. It's a constant balancing act of.
And also, where does that fatigue lie? If you already, mowed the lawn and you're already like feeling like you've been run over by a truck, do you really want to go through this
Correct. Well, and
so soon?
You mentioned the lawn, but it's something like for me, I had to last year realize that mowing my lawn, as much as I enjoy, like I love outdoor projects, for me, because I was outside, I was naturally hotter. That exhausted me. Whereas I could be inside painting my house, which is an equally hard task, but I was in air conditioning and therefore it wouldn't beat me up the same way.
Okay.
And so it's just saying, okay, maybe I have to hire someone to mow my lawn. Maybe that's the choice I have to make to do today, so that I don't have to.
Okay.
I can use my energy in a more efficient way when I do have the energy to do it.
Okay. So I shouldn't be surprised if I see you shoveling your snow off your driveway while wearing shorts. Well, okay, maybe.
Yes, actually that has happened, so it's not shocking.
Well, okay, depends on the snowstorm.
Yeah.
So with the triggers, I know you mentioned, having COVID kind of triggered something. Do you know what your triggers might be, or is it kind of like hindsight? Oh, yeah, okay, I had COVID, so that's why.
For me, it's been hindsight so far.
Okay.
COVID was a big trigger for me, and then as I said, having my son.
Okay.
With having my son, it was actually interesting because a lot of my symptoms mimicked what people would call new mom issues.
Okay.
Forgetfulness, exhaustion.
Mommy, right? Yeah.
And
Okay.
it wasn't until my vision went that I realized. Oh, even numbness. I actually, from having my son, had surgery on both wrists because from picking him up, I got what's called mommy's wrist, and it's a thing some moms get. And so my bad wrists, I started having numbness.
Ooh.
Okay, well, I have bad wrists. Why
Okay.
would that be any different? I'm exhausted. I'm a new mom. Why would that be any different? And it was just, I'm brain fog. I'm having trouble talking to people. I'm having trouble, mom brain. We all have that.
Yeah.
It's an issue. But it was
I'm not getting more than 90 minutes of sleep.
correct. It was 10 times what everyone else was going through.
But you had no basis
I
of comparison.
No, but I didn't understand that.
Okay.
And so when I went in for my MRI, when my vision finally went, there was not only my active lesions, but there had been some healed lesions that we figured out I had been going through flare for an entire year and didn't know, and I just pushed through because I was a new mom. This is what happens when you're a new mom. You just got to do it.
Okay. So I was just, not to go TMI, but I'm just wondering, like, before you decided that you wanted to have a kid, did the doctors say, okay, this could be a trigger, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is actually
and you're like, I'm going to take my
pregnancy
chances?
in
Or?
general for a women, and so believe it or not, women are more likely to develop MS. Men can get MS, but it is more prevalent in women. It's actually also more prevalent in women in their mid-30s. That is just kind of when a lot of women get diagnosed. The way pregnancy works is it kind of, I don't know if you remember from being pregnant, you get colds really easily and you're constantly stuffed up. Your body suppresses your immune system.
Oh, okay.
Having MS, your immune system technically is too strong, which is why the medications we take are immunosuppressing drugs.
Okay.
You go from having your immune system suppressed, and women who have MS report that they feel better their entire pregnancy than they have in years. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to them because they don't have any symptoms the entire time they're pregnant.
Oh, okay.
And then they give birth, and then their body goes absolutely insane. And
overcompensation.
And that's when the issue happens. So a lot of women, when they do have children, the doctor is like, literally, you finish having your child and then you are pumped full of MS drugs because they don't want that to happen to you, because it is pretty much going to happen. With that being said, we thought it was a risk, but at that point I had gone so long without flare. I was 5 years without a flare that they thought that I was clinically isolated syndrome and it wasn't going to happen again.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I had a doctor tell me that if women knew everything that could possibly go wrong as a result of being pregnant, these species would cease to exist in one generation. So So, as we mentioned earlier, MS is like one of those hidden or invisible diseases. In any aspects of your life, have you found that accommodations need to be made to accommodate some of your symptoms?
Yes. And the biggest thing that I had to learn as a person is how to ask for help.
Okay.
I'm naturally a person who burns the candle on both ends. I have 19 projects going at once. I go, 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 go. That is just not something I can do anymore. It is not in my ability.
Okay. That right there must be hard for you to step back.
It is, and I'm learning.
Okay.
I'm getting better, and it's again, you make the choices, and doesn't mean you can't do everything. It means you can't do everything at the same time.
Okay.
And it's just a mindset, and I've had to learn, and it's made my life happier. So I'm glad I learned that.
Would have liked to have learned the lesson a little easier, but
Yep, didn't need to be kicked down with it, but we got there. But so for me, when I think accommodations, the number one thing I can think of is actually the support I've gotten from Burlington Public Schools, being a Burlington teacher. Joanne Faust is the HR director, and she is a glorious woman to work with. And every time I have had an issue, she teaches me what my rights are, and then she makes sure I get everything I need. So my number one thing that I got was an air conditioner. It just so happened that in my school, my half of the building is the only area that's not air conditioned. And that's a more recent development. It happened, and everywhere was getting AC in the last couple of years. But heat is a struggle for me. I have like a certain temperature that I do really good at.
you really don't want me passing out in front of the kids.
No, and those first few months and the last few months are rough. They are, in general, hard. And this year I switched classrooms, and they were great, and they made sure I got an AC. And the first AC they got me didn't work well enough.
Oh, no.
They got me a bigger one. So they really made sure that.
And some other lucky teacher got your hand-me-down.
Yeah, it worked out well.
Everybody was happy.
But so they really made sure I was taken care of.
Okay.
And they also have been fabulous about. I had been absent. I had to be absent because I was so sick, and this has happened a few times now. And they always make sure that I am supported, I am getting the time I need, and I don't feel, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm not working. I need to go back to school.
Where are your lesson plans?
They are very kind and supportive, and that has been the number one accommodation, and it's priceless for me.
I love happy stories.
Yeah. I also I'm lucky that I surround myself with very good people. I have had a few situations where I have had people, what do you mean you're tired? Everyone gets tired. You hear that so much, and people don't understand it's different.
Right. I
am very lucky that I mainly surround myself with people who understand that, and I have a village. I'm a single mom with a son. I have a village who helps me if I'm not feeling well. My parents are wonderful, and they step in and they help me. I have my 3 best friends in the entire world do everything that they can to help me when I need it. And so those are, in my situation, I don't need a handicap placard. Most of the time I'm fine. I don't need a walker. I don't need a cane. And that's not to say down the road I might not, but I'm doing darn good right now. And so most of my accommodations are just the people in my life understanding that we're going to keep Amanda in the shade when we go out to lunch. And it's just little thoughts, and people are very thoughtful about me, and I appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, excellent. Okay, so where could we send you to get vitamin D where it's not hot? Okay.
That's the struggle.
That is a struggle. Okay, next question is diet and exercise. Does diet or exercise help?
There are some people.
Are there like correlations or?
Yeah, again, correlations. There's not official scientific research. There is a whole protocol called the Walls diet that is specifically for MS patients. I tried it once and I couldn't do it. It is a hard diet to follow. But there are people who have been symptom-free for years without medication, just doing that diet.
Okay.
Is that just their disease progression? Who knows?
Right.
But for some people, it works. I'm very lucky that my medication works for me.
Changing your diet is hard.
It's a hard thing to do, and
I struggle with that.
I am, and currently, this last flare was the first time for me that I in the past had joked that I had set it and forget it MS. I was able to go in for my infusion, and I had my troubles, and it wasn't that great, but it wasn't, oh my God.
Yeah.
This last flare was that for me.
Was like you felt like you were run over by a truck.
Yes, and it lasted 4 months, and I was suffering and struggling for 4 months, where normally it was like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that it
6 weeks is still a long time.
Yes, but it was at the time I got there, and it wasn't the end of the world. So to have experienced, like, I had always had 6 weeks and it's done, and I'm cool. I can get past that. And yes, you still increase and you heal after the 6 weeks, but like the bad stuff happened in 6 weeks. I got my medication. I was going to be okay, and this one just kept going. And so for me, it had at the MS Center, I worked with a nutritionist who specializes in MS, and I worked with a physical therapist who specializes in MS. So for me, I am now starting an anti-inflammation diet. It's pretty similar to like a Mediterranean diet, adding a lot more beans and fish, staying away from an exorbitant amount of red meat, and just basically trying to eat healthier. The healthier you are as a person, the better your MS will be. Same thing goes with exercise.
But that's also like a catch-22 too, because if you feel fatigued and you want to avoid getting overheated and exhausted and physical exertion, then how do you exercise?
So it's that balance.
Swimming or
swimming is actually very, very recommended. For me, it's, again, I have an ice vest. I get on the elliptical and I go as far as I can, and it's not necessarily a huge workout routine as much as it is choosing the exercise that's going to add to your life and help. Core exercises is supposed to, again, the stronger you are, the better it is. So if I can do core strengthening and then make sure I'm walking a lot, or I'm playing with my son actively. As a music teacher, I find my job to be very active. If I'm dancing with the kids and I'm getting on the floor and playing with them and just doing instead of sitting, I am better off. And so that
I am making you sit here for an hour.
You're good. But so it's, again, one of those things that you try to, in meaningful ways, find that balance of making those choices. It's making the choices of what won't detract and what will help. But it's a very deliberate thought process.
A very conscious decision. We only have about 10 minutes left, believe it or not. But speaking of exercise, you are going to be participating in an MS walk. Coming up real soon.
So
tell me about that.
Yeah, it's this weekend. I've been, as I had mentioned earlier, I've been participating in MS walks
since college.
Since college, on and off. And this year, this is my first year going to the Manchester one. I've normally done some other locations, so I'm excited to try.
What made you choose that one? Just the date?
The date worked best. The one I normally do is actually on my son's birthday, so I didn't want to do that one. So this one, date, and I couldn't honestly do it earlier because I don't think I would have been able to walk the full thing. So, and I didn't want to do it too late because I didn't want to get too hot. So timing was, for me, the most important thing.
That's why there are lots of them.
There are, and the MS walk itself is great because it is kind of created in a way to support those with the more extreme disability and the less. You have an option on how far you can walk. There's a mile or there's 3. And it is specifically built so that we're called MS warriors.
I like that.
Right? It's a nice way to call it.
I'm a warrior.
Yeah, and we can advocate for ourselves, and we can fundraise for ourselves, and we can actively participate and be a part of the process. There are other MS events, fundraising events too. There's the MS bike. There is.
Is that like a bike-a-thon type thing?
Yeah, it's like there's like one location. You have multiple.
Just bike 20 miles instead of walking one.
And then you meet someone else, and someone else does it, and you go and go, and there's a lot of options. There's an MS challenge, which is for those who are more athletic than some of us, where it's more of like there's more of a triathlon feel to a lot of it.
Wow,
and you can do more things for it. And then there are just events that people host in general with the idea of it going to the MS Society. So there
Okay.
are
So just like a fundraiser, not necessarily an athletic component to it.
well, and it could be a fundraiser. For example,
Okay.
there are a lot of stair climbs. You have to climb so many stairs, and a lot of people as parts of gyms do that. There's another one that is a kind of mud run type thing.
That
where it's
sounds
like,
fun.
my goal is eventually to get there. But it's like obstacle courses in the mud,
Okay.
5 miles. You run it, you do the whole thing. So there are different ways. And like you said, it doesn't all have to be, there can just be fundraisers. I have a friend who's a Burlington High School alum with me who every year does a chili cook-off, and all the proceeds go to the MS Society.
Oh, cool.
So there's a lot of ways to donate. And even honestly, as simple as going on Amazon and you have those Smile Fund.
Yeah.
And every Amazon purchase I make goes straight to the MS Society. So that's something very simple people can do to donate.
Okay. Now, with your walk coming up in May, is there like a minimum fundraising that you have to do in order to participate, or is it just okay?
They want whoever wants to come. So I'm participating with my team. So my team is called Don't MS with Me. Gotta love a good pun. It's made up of me, my parents, my 4-year-old son who's going to do the whole thing, and then my 3 best friends, Stephanie, Lauren, and Dan. So we have a whole team together. We're making
matching t-shirts.
Yep.
Oh yes, you gotta have the
In the process
t-shirt.
of making them.
Gotta have the
Orange
t-shirt.
for MS. That's our color is orange. Yep.
Okay. And as I told you before, I am terrified of the color orange.
So for us, we embrace it. It means you're an MS warrior. So
Okay.
we go there. And so we'll be walking together, and we're going to be doing the fundraising and hoping we can make some
Excellent.
good money for research and the programs that really support people like me.
Now, do you get to, once you get the funds or you're raising the funds, do you get to target saying, I want this to go to outreach, I want this to go to research, or is it just here MS, use it where MS Society?
That to the experts.
Okay.
They are the ones who have been so amazing for us so far. So if they have the knowledge of where it should go that will best benefit us, I say more power to you.
All right. What are other ways that you could volunteer?
A lot of ways are all on the MS Society website.
Okay.
The easiest way is fundraising. Then there's also things like being a host. If you have a business that you would be willing to host a support group.
Okay.
Or even being a person who helps coordinate the support group. They always need someone to lead that.
Okay.
You can contact out and be an advocate and help. Sometimes there are people with MS who need in-home support, bringing meals, things like that. The MS Society themselves will connect people with who needs your support, and they have a whole section on their website where you can sign up to help in a plethora of different ways.
Cool. Now, is the MS Society, do they have a local branch? Is it in Boston? Is it in one of the surrounding towns?
The main one I believe is in Boston, but
Okay.
even throughout that, there is
Okay.
support groups and little headquarters in different areas, and so it's kind of spread out through the whole country.
So like if you needed to attend a support group, you wouldn't necessarily need to go down to downtown Boston every week or
Right, it depends. Sometimes the support groups are in coffee shops. And that's why I say you can host one. It's if you're a coffee shop owner, you work at the library, and that's something that you are able to at your place of business.
Okay.
That helps us. But there are actual places you can go and talk to advocates who can teach you how to advocate for yourself. I have MS. I need support talking to work. I need to do this. And there are places throughout the state that you can go and get that support.
Okay. Backing up a little bit. Actually, I'm looking at some of the questions that I haven't asked. Can the damage done by MS be reversed with medications, or is it once that sheath, or what did you call it?
Myelin.
The myelin. Once the myelin's gone, it's gone forever. It's not going to grow back or anything.
So part of that depends on age. The older you are, the less likely the myelin to recover is. As of right now, there is not a medication that will heal the myelin. Time can. It won't heal fully, and again, it depends on your type of MS
Okay.
and whatnot. But it, like for me, my myelin has repaired a little bit, and so that's why my symptoms don't come back all the time.
As often. Okay.
The biggest thing that medication does is to stop a flare from getting worse.
Okay.
So there are medications that if once you're in flare, it kind of halts it in its place instead of letting the symptoms continue, letting it continue, and
Okay.
just stops it there. Yeah.
Okay. How do you cope psychologically or mentally with not really knowing what the future is, whether you're in the middle of a flare-up, you don't know if it's going to work, last 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, or when am I going to have another flare-up, or just, oh my gosh, how do I navigate these waters? Is there like a psychological support group, or how do you, not even a support group, but how do you cope mentally? Do you have strategies, or?
Well, for me, the number one thing I do is I surround myself with good people. My doctor is very confident in the medication I'm on.
Okay.
And my medication gives me a lot of confidence that I'm going to be okay.
Okay.
I don't know what the future will hold, and I plan for that, and I
Well, I know none of us really know what the
no,
future holds,
right. There's a little more uncertainty with
but
it.
exactly.
And so I therefore plan a little bit more. My way of kind of dealing and coping is I am a planner, and I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And for me, that helps me because even though it might not be the number one way I want it to go, it's gonna go a way.
Okay.
And I'll have a way to get through that. So having a good team of doctors who I know if anything goes wrong, they're going to do whatever they can to make me okay as fast as they can.
Okay.
Having a support group that gets it and can share their experiences with me. I have an online one and an in-person one that it is just, we all get it. We know what happens.
Okay.
I can see their successes. I can see their failures and see what they do to work towards the success.
And you can just commiserate too if you need to. Okay.
And sometimes you just need to cry. That happens. It's also, I have, like I've mentioned, my friends and my parents are my number one support, and having that makes
that helps.
the day-to-day
It's
easier, and it makes
okay.
when you do have a bad day, you'll know they'll pick up your slack, and then you know that you'll get through that, and it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, great.
And then, I mean, I am a big advocate for therapy. We all need it, and if it's something that for me, it had been a huge help when I was first diagnosed, to be able to talk to someone and go through those what ifs,
yeah. Okay.
and really learn
Okay.
what my feeling on the situations and be able to work through that, and therefore know that planning helps me, and doing all that kind of stuff is something that makes it a lot easier for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we're out of time. So I wish you the best of luck on your walk.
Thank you.
Hopefully we get lots of money raised for that.
So.
And thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you for giving up your evening to come here, and thank your son for giving up mommy. And I also do want to thank everyone in the audience today for tuning in, and I hope that tonight's discussion has raised awareness and acceptance for MS and for those in our community that are impacted. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and have a great night, and I'll see you around town.